Okay, well, thank you for coming back for video number 2. Don't forget to like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Hashtag this, share with a friend. And we're just going to jump right in. Chapter 2, race doesn't matter. Remember, when there's some pauses, it's going to a different section, okay? I believe there's only one race, the human race. Rosa Parks. Does race matter? Race doesn't matter. Repeat, race does not matter. And for good measure, at their time, race matters not, or at least it shouldn't. For some, it does matter, and for others, not so much. Certain groups of society, both domestic and abroad, have derived all their importance from their points of origin, eye color, and trace levels of melanin in their skin, or lack thereof. But for all intents and purposes, it is not something that should define any part of any person's life. Any abuse or over recognition of this in one way or another is at its core irrational and based purely on incoherence and ignorance. Yet, if we are being honest, we all know that in some way or another it has and does continue to influence first impressions of people on every continent. Whether this is pre-programmed or conditioned with time, it is a natural inclination that is so ingrained in us all, it practically seems second nature, such as writing with the preferred hand. While much of this might be acknowledged with a little introspection and self awareness, it may be a default position and knee jerk reaction that is not even desirable. While we can work to eliminate this tumor in us all, keeping it in check might be one of the highest goals we can aspire to achieve. Still, this, this urge must be confronted anytime it is used as a factor in determining others' worth or how to treat them, even if the perpetrator is ourselves. The why. But why doesn't matter. Next to sex, race is one of the first and most accurate things noticeable on first glance. It would be completely possible to be off by a few years or perhaps a few decades when it comes to people's age, especially with the advent of ever expanding cosmetic procedures. Other traits, such as social status, job, or education level, might be completely misjudged by others as well. But when it comes to race, and to some degree or another nationality, there is a lot less confusion. Having spent over a decade abroad, I know the feeling of being able to be spotted or spotting others out of a field of a thousand Asians. This can both be uncomfortable and yet comforting. Locating the one person who is like you in a sea of variants. At the end of the day, by a sheer exhuming of a body, very little could be actually determined from the mere skeletal remains of any human being. On the surface, you may know some basic facts, such as race, age, and sex, but the qualia of each person's experience would simply be impossible to understand with bare science. Whether a person was raised in their motherland or by rich or poor parents would not be so easily determined without additional data and context. How exactly ideas of culture and identity were passed from one spawn to the next might vary greatly, considering nothing more than which generation one was born, first, second, third, and so on. Truly, each experience is a completely different, complex ball of yarn to untangle. So while race may be a factor, it is far from the only one to consider in people's lives. What is race? Defining race would be a prudent starting point. Merriam-Webster's dictionary gives an amazing definition that is a great starting point. Any of the groups that humans are often divided into based on physical traits regarded as common among people of shared ancestry. At its core, race is a subcategory that is useful to classify and find common likeness amongst people. These classifications can be useful in some regards, but have some disastrous consequences as well. With 8 billion people on the planet, it seems logical to break people up into smaller groups: boys or girls, teenagers, children, elders, light, dark, and so on. Case in point, consider the problem of Asia. Having nearly 5 billion people and 60% of the world's population, China, Russia, Tajikistan, Thailand, Saudi Arabia, and Iran are all Asians. Therefore, it makes sense to clump people together in groups to be able to meaningfully discuss the continent. Asia is divided into East Asia, Southeast Asia, Central Asia, the Middle East, subcontinent of India, and whatever you want to classify Russia as. Looking at Asia as an example, it does seem to make sense to talk about groups who share common ancestry, origin, language, cuisine, culture, mythology, and so on. The same can be said of Europe, which is divided into as many groups, such as East-West Europe, the Mediterranean, the Balkans, Scandinavia, and the United Kingdom. Additionally, we have other categories such as Slavic people who are scattered all about. While these groups may serve as a way to visualize and manage an incomprehensibly large number, it is not without its limits. Although these divisions can bring unity and commonality, it is by its nature divisive. Given the tribalistic nature of humans, it is only logical to imagine that this is bound to be abused if left unchecked. So while it should not be disregarded completely, it is beyond necessary to make sure that not 1 ounce of importance or priority is placed on any group over another. This goal may seem lofty to state, but the reality is far more bleak when considering the course of history. Race is ironically the same word tied into an actual competition in English. This hopefully is a double entendre only in English, but one that remains a constant variable in how exactly people run this brief sprint we call life. However, the more we examine its meanings and origins, the harder it gets to define with precision and accuracy. This is even further true when examining one's deoxyribonucleic acid and concretely determining what exact percentage is needed to qualify for one or multiple races. Additionally, words like ethnicity, nationality, and culture can also severely muddy the waters when we begin to examine other factors such as artificial insemination, immigration, and adoption. While it may be easiest to think solely in terms of blood, DNA, and microscopes, in the age of modern transience, this too may be an ever evolving concept with additional discoveries. And considering the very nature of evolution, we are all in a constant state of change, both individually and as a whole. The noble pursuit of completely understanding race and the origin has been even further complicated when DNA kits were introduced and made known that we are all mixed in some manner or another, and no one is relatively close to being pure pedigreed. With less knowledge of the universe and the nature of reality, it seems far easier to make assumptions about ourselves and others. Yet, as we continue to learn, discover, and create, the limits of our current knowledge is ever revealed. In each expanding era of discovery and exploration of ourselves, the earth, and the cosmos. Each generation can look back and marvel at the sheer ignorance of past generations, who were at the cusp of cutting edge technology that was being discovered. However, whatever may be determined to determine the exact makeup of race, one thing can be sure. Humans are complex beings with multiple points of origin which have crisscrossed in the past. Unlike other categories of math or science, there is a fluidity of humanity that is ever growing and reaching. The sequencing of DNA was only accomplished within the last century, and who knows what other great mysteries may be discovered about our amazing unwinding story. We may only be at the beginning stages of uncovering some of the greatest enigmas that are at the elementary levels of the cells that comprise us, including the great mysteries at the quantum level. While we continue to explore uncharted terrains, we can stand in awe at the great canyon we find ourselves. That betwixt the discovered and the unknown. As we proceed to make these great steps forward in this next millennia, let us take a moment of reflection and respect to those who came before us, by no fault of their own, were ignorant of the knowledge we possess. And perhaps, as a moment of legitimate introspection, apologize in advance to whatever future generations' assessment of us might be. Since we can only make decisions with the information we have, let us proceed with a sincere sense of humility and grace. This is the only path forward, as no one wants to be judged for the things they are yet to learn. An immediate problem. There is a giant, gaping hole that is easily understood about race with minimal contemplation. People don't stay put. Considering the fact that race is associated with points of origin, it should be fairly easy to understand. But it's not relatively close to being so. There are a variety of factors called push and pull that either force people to migrate or entice them to other locations. Push factors are events such as war, famine, disease, and other natural disasters that may render one's homeland unlivable. Pull factors are things that make it appealing to go to another country, such as economic opportunities, exploration, expansion, adventure, and so on. The combination of these in the past and present means that humans have been amazingly good at exploring expanding options in the world. Had everyone stayed home and never migrated or intermarried, it sorry. Okay, lost my place. Okay, had everyone stayed home and never migrated or intermarried, it would be embarrassingly easy to understand race with absolute precision. Even in this unlikely scenario, it would require every continent to spontaneously produce people at the same time from the land. However, the world which we inhabit has seen countless wars of conquest that have forced assimilation and a bleeding of cultures. Literally. Understanding this, it is next to impossible to say with absolute certainty the precise location everyone originated. While we can explore and chart our DNA, our records of the past only go so far. Much information and records have been lost in the sands of time, and so at this juncture, we can do our best to trace the past of our forefathers and mothers. Understanding this problem off the top, it is easy to fathom that a few thousand years ago, many parts of the world were unexplored and people were wandering from location to location, trying to do the highest task of life: survival. This quest for subsistence saw humans tame wild beasts and all manner of vegetation in the quest for eating, clothing, and shelter. The weather and what crops or animals were geographically available started to affect different traits of the inhabitants. Well, these did not change overnight. Things like body hair or lack thereof, mutations, pigmentations, height, immunities started to severely change the way humans looked. Through trade and forced integration, these people, ideas, and flora and fauna were transplanted across the globe. In short, people mixed and crisscrossed paths hundreds, if not thousands of times in the past. It's not as easy as we might think to draw a line from point A to point B directly. Instead, these lines might look something like point B to C to W to H to K to A to B to Z. Studying the origins of humans should give us all pause to marvel at the majestic journey of our ancestors, how they traversed to bring us here to this exact moment. The only race that counts. It is somewhat counterintuitive to contemplate, but in a world of actual daily races, we are all together in this grand marathon of sentience. Those who came before us were only able to progress so far, and then the baton was passed on to us. And while it may seem as though we are in a decathlon vying against each other, we are, ironically, all working together, sometimes for and against ourselves. In the past, an alliance of diseased, beast, famine, and civil war have threatened to wipe out our collective existence. While civil war is seen as a fight between members of an individual country, by definition, any war fought is a civil war of humanity. Civil, after all, merely refers to civilians, and in the global race, we are all members. These little nuances are often overlooked and not thought about with enough care. But if a true examination of ourselves is made, the absurdity of so much of our behavior is evident. In the grand scheme of life, humans tend to think of themselves higher in the evolutionary ladder than other beings on this planet. Yet, if we look at the animal kingdom, we would see an incredible level of teamwork, camaraderie, cooperation from the lowly creatures we feel so superior to. From the ants who live and work communally to the wolves who slay much bigger enemies, we can see clearly that on this planet we are all we have to work together on to ensure our survival. While we may fight in petty disputes over money, resources, boundaries, and land, at the end of the day, the greatest fight for survival is being waged minute to minute around the globe, both individually and collectively. Especially with the recent outbreak of COVID 19, it is clearly evident that regional problems can easily travel throughout the globe and threaten our very societies, economies, and ability to function. Looking again to the animal kingdom, much inspiration can be gained from seeing the care in which beings will look out for their own and how the sum of a whole can be multiplied by factors of smaller parts. From insects to primates to the actual floral world, much beauty abounds in the struggle for survival with the abundant and incredible power of synergy. Furthermore, while animals have no way of conveying historical and philosophical messages of the past, we have a clear advantage over those under the food chain. And although much is disseminated through instinct and learned behavior from our lower living ancestors, we have the ability to change action mid movement. And while most of all animal behavior is based on instinct and mere urge, we can and will evolve past this primal thinking that would be scoffed at if properly understood by smaller beings. Getting real. This is the last section. In the past, people thought of race in terms of quarters, halves, and even fools in informal discussions about race. But this has been proven beyond any doubt to be utter foolishness. The reality is that everyone is a cocktail of 16% this, 5% that, and 10% of the other. All are mixed, and yet all are mixed, and yet every last one of us equals 100% human. As much as it would make no sense to cut or divide our physical bodies into halves or quarters, it makes just as little sense to do the same thing to the family that gives us all life. This binary thinking may have served us well in the past, but it is truly sophomoric and juvenile at its foundation. So, although we like to think So, although we thinking about race can truly help us to determine where we came from and why we are who we are, it should play absolutely no role in determining where we are going. While it should be understood, respected, and appreciated, realizing exactly what race is should not distract us from the reality that we are all of the same race, the human race. While no group encompasses the totality of humanity, individually, we are all contributing to the 0.000000001% of the overall sum of one humanity, one race. Together, we are one unit. Though it may be divided and at times shrink and grow, we are the same species and the same collective race, one unit. We may vary in size, color, shape, belief, and geographic location, but in the grand scheme of the cosmos, we are all in the same location. To quote the legend himself, Carl Sagan, he made this case so compellingly in Pale Blue Dot in 1984. Look again at that dot. That's here. That's home. That's us. On it, everyone you love, everyone you know, everyone you've ever heard of, every human being who ever was, lived out their lives. The aggregate of our joy and suffering, thousands of confident religions, ideologies, and economic doctrines, every hunter and forger, every hero and coward, every creator and destroyer of civilization, every king and peasant, every young couple in love, every mother and father, hopeful child, inventor, explorer, every teacher of morals and every corrupt politician, every superstar and every supreme leader, every saint and every sinner in the history of our species live there, on a mote of dust suspended in a sunbeam. The earth is a very small stage in the vast cosmic arena. Think of the rivers of blood spilled by those generals and emperors so that in glory and triumph they could become the momentary masters of a fraction of a dot. Think of the endless cruelties visited by the inhabitants of one corner of this pixel on the scarcely distinguishable inhabitants of some other corner. How frequent their misunderstandings, how eager they are to kill one another, how fervent their hatreds. Our posturings, our imagined self importance, the delusion that we have some privileged position in the universe, are challenged by this point of pale light, our planet, a lonely speck in the enveloping cosmic dark. In our obscurity, in all this vastness, there is no hope that we will come from somewhere else to save us from ourselves. The earth is the only world so far to harbor life. The earth is the only world known so far to harbor life. There is nowhere else, at least in the near future, to which our species could migrate. Visit? Yes. Settle? Not yet. Like it or not, for the moment, the earth is where we make our stand. It has been said that astronomy is humbling and character building experience. This is perhaps no better demonstrated of the folly of human conceits than this distant image of our tiny world. To me, it underscores our responsibility to deal more kindly with one another, to preserve and cherish the pale blue dot, the only home we've ever known. That's the end of his quote, and there's one more paragraph. For the difference of philosophy and religion, theists and non-theists alike can marvel at such a magnificent quote as this that truly encompasses the gravity of what we are facing. Words of wisdom from the past still challenge us some 30 years later as we continue to travel about the universe as Voyager 1 did when it sent back those magnificent images of Mother Earth. Let us marvel at the magnitude of the sacrifice, the struggle of those who came before us, who charted hostile terrain. For the heroes of old who faced behemoth beings, invisible amoeba, and pathogens, and battled freezing temperatures to preserve our race, to ensure that the baton would be passed here to us here and now. For the numerous nights under stars and not roofs, for the countless nights of hunger, for all the sacrifice, we are here now. One people, one race, the human race. That's chapter 1. That's the opening. Nothing in there very too specific. It's kind of some generalities and some platitudes, but definitely as the book unfolds, it gets a lot more specific. It gets a lot more poignant. It gets a lot more focused. And yeah, it was hard. It was not easy. It's taken several years and hundreds of hours of research and writing. But at the tail end now, and I just want to make sure I finish. So uh, please leave a comment about what you thought about the first chapter. That would be very much appreciated by me. And I look forward to seeing you back on the next video. Goodbye.